The sea was black beneath a sky the colour of bruised iron, and the longship pitched and rolled like a dying beast. Prince Alaric of Rivermouth knelt on the wet deck, his wrists bound behind his back, his clothes still damp from the spray that had soaked him when they dragged him from the shore. His kingdom had fallen 3 days ago. His father had died with a sword in his hand and a prayer on his lips. His mother had fled to the southern isles, and his brothers were scattered like leaves before the winter wind. He was alone. He was a prisoner, and he was about to die. Jarl Gunnar Stormhand stood at the prow of the ship, his massive frame silhouetted against the dying sun. He was not the tallest Viking Alaric had ever seen, but there was something about him that made other men step back. His left hand was twisted, the fingers curled into a claw, the skin mottled with scars from the lightning that had struck him when he was young. They said he had been dead for 3 minutes before his heart started beating again. They said the gods had marked him, that he could not be killed by ordinary means. Alaric did not know if he believed in the gods of the north, but looking at Gunnar, he understood why other men did. The Jarl turned, his grey eyes finding Alaric in the gloom. He walked toward him, his boots heavy on the wooden planks, and stopped when he was close enough that Alaric could smell the leather and iron of him, the faint trace of mead on his breath. "You are the last one," Gunnar said. His voice was low, rough as grinding stone. "The last of the bloodline, the last who can claim the throne of Rivermouth. I could ransom you, I could sell you to your mother's enemies, I could keep you as a trophy, a pet to show my men that even princes bow to me." He crouched down, bringing his face level with Alaric's. "But I will not do any of those things. I will give you a choice. Serve me, truly serve me, with your mind and your hands and your loyalty, or I will chain you to a stone and cast you into the sea." Alaric looked past Gunnar at the dark water that stretched to the horizon. He had never learned to swim. His father had tried to teach him when he was a boy, but the fear had been too great, the cold, the depth, the feeling of water closing over his head. He had screamed until his father pulled him out, and after that no one had tried again. The sea had been his enemy long before the Vikings came. Now it would be his grave. "You are afraid," Gunnar said. It was not a question. Alaric lifted his chin, forcing himself to meet the Jarl's cold eyes. "I am not afraid of dying," he said. "I am afraid of drowning. There is a difference." Gunnar's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Clever. I like clever men. They are more useful than brave men, and they live longer." He stood, looking down at Alaric with an expression that was impossible to read. "I will give you until dawn to decide. But know this, Prince, if you choose to serve, you will serve completely. There will be no half measures, no secret loyalties, no whispered prayers to your southern god. You will be mine, body and soul. And if I ever doubt you, I will not ask questions. I will simply throw you overboard and let the sea do its work." He turned and walked away, leaving Alaric alone on the deck, the wind whipping his dark hair across his face, the salt spray stinging his eyes. Alaric did not sleep that night. He sat against the mast, his wrist still bound, and watched the stars wheel overhead. He thought of his father, who had taught him to read and write, who had believed that a king's greatest weapon was his mind. He thought of his mother, who had sung to him in the old tongue, who had told him stories of heroes and monsters and the thin line between them. He thought of the sea, dark and endless, waiting to swallow him whole. And he thought of Gunnar, the man with the twisted hand and the cold grey eyes, who had given him a choice that was not really a choice at all. When dawn broke over the horizon, painting the water in shades of rose and gold, Alaric made his decision. He found Gunnar at the prow, watching the sun rise. The Jarl did not turn when Alaric approached, but his shoulders tensed, ready. "I will serve," Alaric said. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled behind his back. "Not because I am afraid of drowning, not because I am afraid of you, because I want to live, because I believe that as long as I am alive, there is hope, and because I have learned that the dead cannot help anyone." Gunnar turned to look at him, and for a moment something flickered in his grey eyes, something that might have been respect, or curiosity, or something else entirely. "You are wiser than most princes," he said, "and more foolish. That is a dangerous combination." He gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward and cut the ropes from Alaric's wrists. "You will not be chained. You will not be beaten. You will eat what I eat and sleep where I sleep, but you will earn your place. Every day you will prove that you are worth keeping alive, and if you fail, even once, the sea will have you." The journey north took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of cold spray and salt-crusted skin, of learning to stand on a pitching deck without falling, of eating dried fish and hard bread that tasted of nothing. Alaric was given to Einar, a young warrior with a scarred face and a quiet manner, to be taught the ways of the north. Einar was not cruel, but he was not kind. He watched Alaric with the same detachment a man might watch a new horse, testing its limits, looking for weaknesses. "You are weak," Einar said on the second day as Alaric struggled to pull an oar. "Your arms are like twigs, your hands are soft. You have never worked a day in your life." "I have worked," Alaric said, gritting his teeth. "I have studied. I have written. I have learned 5 languages. I have memorized the laws of 3 kingdoms. I have—" "You have done nothing that matters," Einar interrupted. "Not here. Not in the north. Here a man is judged by what he can do with his hands, not his head. You will learn, or you will die." Alaric did not argue. He pulled the oar until his hands bled, and then he pulled some more. He learned to eat without gagging when the food was rotten. He learned to sleep on the hard deck, wrapped in a thin blanket, while the wind howled and the waves crashed. He learned to hold his tongue when the other warriors mocked him, calling him princeling and southerner, and worse. And slowly, day by day, he began to change. His arms grew stronger. His hands grew calloused. His stomach learned to accept the food that would have made him sick a month before. But it was his mind that Gunnar wanted. On the 10th night, as the ship sailed through a narrow strait between 2 islands, Gunnar called Alaric to his cabin. The cabin was small, lit by a single lantern that swung with the motion of the ship, and the walls were covered in maps and charts that Alaric recognized. They were maps of the southern kingdoms, his kingdoms, drawn in the careful hand of a spy. "You can read these," Gunnar said. It was not a question. Alaric nodded. "They are accurate, but they are incomplete. The rivers have changed since these were drawn. The roads have been moved. The forts have been rebuilt." Gunnar's eyes narrowed. "How do you know?" "Because I helped design them," Alaric said. "My father believed that a king should know his lands. He took me on every survey, every inspection, every journey. I have walked every mile of Rivermouth. I have seen every fort, every bridge, every hidden path." He paused, looking at the maps. "I can help you, not with your raids, with your strategy. You want to conquer, not just pillage. You want to build an empire. I can help you do that, but only if you let me." Gunnar stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, harsh sound that held no humour. "You would help me conquer your own people? Your own kingdom?" "I would help you build something that does not need to conquer," Alaric said. "The south is weak because it is divided. The north is weak because it is poor. There is a middle ground, a way to bring them together. Trade, not war. Alliances, not raids. I can show you, but you have to trust me." Gunnar's twisted hand curled into a fist, then relaxed. "Trust is earned," he said, "not given. Show me. Prove that you are worth more than the weight of your body in silver, and then, perhaps, I will trust you." That night, Alaric sat at a small table in Gunnar's cabin, a quill in his hand, and began to write. He wrote about the rivers that connected the southern kingdoms, the trade routes that had been abandoned, the alliances that could be forged. He wrote about the weakness of the southern kings, their rivalries, their fears. He wrote about the harvests and the winters, the ports and the forests, the gold and the grain. And when he was finished, he handed the pages to Gunnar and waited. Gunnar read in silence, his grey eyes moving slowly across the page. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. "You have given me the keys to your kingdom," he said. "Do you understand what that means?" "I understand that you could destroy everything I have written," Alaric said. "I understand that you could use this knowledge to burn every city I have ever loved, but I am choosing to believe that you will not, because you are not a monster. You are a man, and men can choose." Gunnar was silent for a long time. Then he folded the pages and tucked them into his tunic. "We will see," he said. "We will see what kind of man I am." They reached Jotunheim on a grey morning. The fjord still as glass, the mountains reflected in the water like the teeth of a sleeping giant. Alaric had never seen anything like it. The settlement was carved into the side of the cliff, its longhouses built from massive logs that seemed to grow from the earth itself. The great hall dominated the centre, its doors wide enough to admit giants, its roof thatched with turf that had turned green with moss. It was cold, colder than anything Alaric had ever known, but there was a stark beauty to it that took his breath away. Gunnar led him through the settlement, past the stairs of warriors and women and children, to a small hut near the edge of the fjord. "You will stay here," he said. "You will have food, water, and a fire. You will not leave without my permission. Do you understand?" Alaric nodded. He understood. He was still a prisoner, even if the chains were invisible. The weeks that followed were a blur of new customs and new challenges. Alaric was given tasks, menial at first, then more demanding. He cleaned the stables, mended the nets, helped the blacksmith at the forge. He learned to chop wood, to start a fire with wet tinder, to skin a rabbit without ruining the fur. He hated every moment of it, but he did not complain. He had chosen to serve, and he would serve. At night, Gunnar called him to the great hall. The Jarl sat on his throne of whalebone, a cup of mead in his hand, and Alaric stood before him, answering questions about the South, about its politics, its weaknesses, its secrets. Gunnar listened carefully, his grey eyes never leaving Alaric's face, and when he was satisfied, he would wave his hand, and Alaric would return to his hut. It was not a life Alaric would have chosen, but it was a life, and he clung to it. One night, a warrior named Sigurd approached Alaric in the shadows behind the great hall. Sigurd was broad and bearded, with a scar that split his upper lip and a voice like grinding stones. He had been watching Alaric for weeks, and his eyes held a hunger that made Alaric's skin crawl. "You do not belong here," Sigurd said. "You are a southerner, a weakling, a worm. Gunnar keeps you because he is soft, but I am not soft." He stepped closer, close enough that Alaric could smell the mead on his breath. "I could kill you right now. No one would stop me. No one would care." Alaric's heart pounded in his chest, but he did not step back. "You could," he said, "but you will not, because Gunnar would ask questions, and when he learned that you killed his translator, his strategist, the man who holds the keys to the South in his head, he would not be pleased. You are afraid of Gunnar. I have seen it in the way you look at him. Do not pretend otherwise." Sigurd's face twisted with fury, but he did not raise his hand. He stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, and then he turned and walked away into the darkness. Alaric leaned against the wall of the great hall, his legs trembling, and waited for his heart to slow. The winter passed, slow and dark, and Alaric began to find his place in the settlement. He learned the names of the warriors, the stories of their battles, the songs they sang when the mead flowed freely. He learned to speak their tongue without an accent, to curse like a Viking, to laugh at jokes that would have horrified him a year ago. He was still an outsider, still the southerner, still the prince who had chosen to serve rather than die. But the stares grew less hostile and the whispers grew less sharp. And then in the spring, everything changed. Gunnar called Alaric to the great hall and handed him a letter. The seal was broken, the parchment stained with salt water and blood. "Read it," the Jarl said. Alaric unfolded the letter and read. It was from Jarl Sigurd, the same Sigurd who had threatened him in the shadows, and it was addressed to a southern lord. The letter promised betrayal. It promised that Sigurd would kill Gunnar and take control of the Northern Alliance, and in return, the Southern Lord would give him gold and ships and safe passage. Alaric looked up at Gunnar. The Jarl's face was unreadable, but his twisted hand was curled into a fist. "You knew," Alaric said. "You knew about the letter." "I suspected," Gunnar said. "I have eyes everywhere, but I needed proof, and now I have it." He looked at Alaric, and his grey eyes were cold. "Sigurd offered you a place in his plot, did he not?" Alaric's throat tightened. "He did. He said he would send me home if I helped him poison you." "And what did you say?" Alaric met his gaze. "I said no. I said I would not betray you, because you have given me something no one else has ever given me." "What is that?" "A chance," Alaric said. "A chance to be something more than a prisoner. A chance to build something instead of watching it burn. A chance to prove that I am not nothing." Gunnar stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You have chosen well," he said. "Tonight we will deal with Sigurd, and you will stand beside me, not as a servant, as an ally." The great hall was packed with warriors that night, the fire burning high, the mead flowing freely. Sigurd sat at the far end of the table, his scarred face flushed with drink, his laughter loud and false. Gunnar sat on his throne, Alaric standing at his right hand, and when the hall grew quiet, the Jarl rose. "Sigurd," Gunnar said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Stand." Sigurd's laughter died. He stood, his hand going to the axe at his belt. "What is this, Gunnar?" "This," Gunnar said, holding up the letter, "is your death warrant. You plotted to kill me. You plotted to sell the north to the south. You plotted to betray every man in this hall." The warriors turned to look at Sigurd, their eyes hard, their hands on their weapons. Sigurd's face went pale, but he did not deny it. "You are weak, Gunnar," he spat. "You keep a southerner at your side. You listen to his words instead of the words of your own men. You have forgotten what it means to be a Viking." Gunnar stepped down from the throne, his twisted hand raised. "I have not forgotten," he said. "I have learned. There is a difference." He stopped before Sigurd, close enough that their chests almost touched. "You are banished. Leave this place tonight. If I ever see your face again, I will kill you myself." Sigurd's face twisted with rage, but he did not argue. He turned and walked out of the hall, and the warriors let him go. When the doors closed behind him, Gunnar turned to Alaric. "You could have gone with him," he said quietly. "You could have taken his offer. You would be free now, on your way home." "I would be a traitor," Alaric said, "and traitors do not find peace. They only find more betrayal." Gunnar nodded slowly. "You are not what I expected, Alaric of Rivermouth. You are not weak. You are not a coward. You are something else, something I have not seen before." "What is that?" Gunnar's lips curved into a smile. A real smile, the first Alaric had seen from him. "A man," he said. "Just a man. And that is enough." The summer came, warm and brief, and Alaric stood on the cliffs above the fjord, looking south toward the land he had lost. Gunnar came to stand beside him, his twisted hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "You could still go back," Gunnar said. "I would not stop you. You have earned your freedom." Alaric looked at him, at the scarred face and the cold grey eyes, at the man who had given him a choice and let him live. "I know," he said, "but I am not sure I want to go back. Not yet. There is still so much to do here, so much to build." Gunnar was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You would stay? In the cold? With the people who took everything from you?" Alaric looked out at the fjord, at the longhouses and the fishing boats and the children playing in the shallows. He thought of his father, dead on the battlefield. He thought of his mother, alone in the southern isles. He thought of the sea, dark and endless, that had once terrified him. And he thought of the man beside him, who had given him a chance to become something more than a prisoner. "I would stay," Alaric said, "not because I have forgotten, not because I forgive, because there is something here that I need, something I did not know I was looking for." "What is that?" Alaric turned to face him, and in the light of the setting sun, Gunnar's grey eyes were almost warm. "A purpose," Alaric said. "A reason to live, a chance to build something that will outlast me." He paused and his voice dropped lower. "And a man who looked at me when I had nothing and saw something worth keeping." Gunnar stared at him for a long moment. Then he reached out and put his hand on Alaric's shoulder. His twisted hand, the one the lightning had marked. It was rough and scarred, but it was warm. "Then stay," Gunnar said. "Stay, and help me build. Stay, and show my people that the South is not the enemy. Stay, and be the bridge between the world you lost and the world you have found." Alaric nodded, and they stood together on the cliffs, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sea was calm, the wind was still, and for the first time in a long time, Alaric was not afraid. He was not afraid of the water. He was not afraid of the cold. He was not afraid of the man beside him, or the future that stretched out before them like the endless sea. He had chosen to serve. But in serving, he had found something he had not expected. He had found a home. The stars came out one by one, and the northern lights began to dance across the sky. Alaric looked up at them, at the green and purple and gold, and he thought of all the choices that had brought him here. The choice to kneel. The choice to serve. the choice to stay. He had been given a choice between servitude and death, and he had chosen to live. But somewhere along the way, the servitude had become something else. It had become loyalty. It had become respect. It had become something that looked almost like friendship. Gunnar was not a good man. Alaric knew that. He had killed without mercy, burned villages, taken prisoners. But he was not a monster either. He was a man trying to keep his people alive in a world that wanted them dead. And Alaric, the prince who had lost everything, had found a place beside him. "Gunnar," Alaric said quietly, "do you ever think about what happens after? After the raids, after the battles, after the empire you are trying to build?" Gunnar was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I think about it every day. I think about the children who will inherit this world. I think about whether they will remember us as heroes or monsters. I think about whether any of it will matter when we are gone." "And what do you conclude?" Gunnar turned to look at him, and his grey eyes were softer than Alaric had ever seen them. "I conclude that it does not matter what they remember. What matters is what we do now. What matters is whether we can look at ourselves in the mirror and know that we tried to build something better than what we found." Alaric nodded slowly. "Then let us build," he said, "together." They stood on the cliffs until the northern lights faded and the stars began to dim. The sea whispered below, and the wind carried the sound of the settlement, the laughter of children, the clang of the smith's hammer, the distant song of a warrior remembering a battle long past. Alaric closed his eyes and breathed in the cold air, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He had been given a choice, serve or be cast into the sea. He had chosen to serve. But in choosing to serve, he had found something he had never expected. He had found a purpose. He had found a home, and he had found a man who had looked at him when he had nothing and seen something worth keeping. The sun rose over the fjord, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. Alaric opened his eyes and looked at the new day, and he knew that whatever came next, he would face it. Not as a prince, not as a prisoner, not as a servant, as a man who had chosen to live and who had found a reason to keep living. "Are you ready?" Gunnar asked. Alaric nodded. "I am ready." They walked down from the cliffs together toward the settlement, toward the future, toward whatever the gods had in store. And behind them, the sea stretched to the horizon, dark and endless, but no longer terrifying. Because Alaric had learned that the sea was not his enemy. It was just a part of the world, like the cold, like the north, like the man who walked beside him. He had chosen to serve. But in the end, he had found that serving was not the same as surrendering. It was the beginning of something new, something that had not yet been written, something that he would write himself, one day at a time, with the quill in his hand and the fire in his heart and the memory of a choice that had saved his life. The snow began to fall, soft and silent, dusting the cliffs and the fjord and the rooftops of the settlement below. Alaric pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders, and Gunnar walked beside him, their footsteps leaving parallel tracks in the fresh white powder. They did not speak. There was no need for words. Everything that mattered had already been said. When they reached the great hall, Gunnar stopped at the doors and turned to face Alaric. "You are not my servant," he said. "You are not my prisoner. You are not my friend, not yet. But you are something. Something I do not have a name for, and I think in time I will learn to call it by its true name." Alaric looked at him, at the twisted hand and the scarred face, at the man who had given him a choice when he had nothing. "And what do you think that name will be?" Gunnar smiled, a real smile, warm and unexpected. "I do not know," he said, "but I am willing to find out." He pushed open the doors and walked into the great hall, and Alaric followed him. The fire was burning high, the warriors were laughing and drinking, and the world was exactly as it had always been. But something had changed. Something had shifted. Alaric could feel it in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. He had been given a choice. He had chosen to serve. And in choosing to serve, he had found something he had never expected to find. He had found himself.